I'm AnneMarie Mingo, and I'm the Associate Professor of Ethics, Culture, and Moral Leadership, and Director of the Metro Urban Institute here at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary. In the programs of the PTS Neighborhood Collaborative, we connect the learned theology of the Academy with the lived theology of the church and society to form present and future Christian leaders in the service of their context. In this series, we understand neighborhood theology as responding to Christ's call to love our neighbor as we encounter each other in community. I'm extremely fortunate and excited today to have with us as our guest the Reverend William H. Lamar IV, who is the pastor of Metropolitan Methodist Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C. He is the author of the book Ancestors, which is one that you should definitely go and get, and he is also an organizer committed to justice in all of its forms. Welcome, Reverend Lamar.
Thank you, Dr. Mingo, whom we have known for a long, long time.
We have known each other for a long, long time. We do go back, and as I think about that, it actually shapes and forms a part of the work that we both do, because we have known each other since our time at Florida A&M University.
30 years.
30 plus years now, where we were both students at that school, and we were also both active in ministry work while we were college students. And one of the things that has shifted since our time there is that we both now find ourselves in cities, in urban spaces.
Yes.
But now, with you being in Washington, D.C., and I being here in Pittsburgh, we are facing different types of opportunities and challenges for ministry. As we think about the different types of neighborhoods and communities and areas that have formed us, I'd love to understand one of the things that has been so central to what we're doing here within the Neighborhood Collaborative and here at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary is how would you describe your understanding of a theology of neighbor?
So the first thing that comes to mind is Christian ideas of the divine as it relates to the Trinity. What I recall was the beauty of a lecture, probably by Willie Jennings, around perichoresis, around God existing in perfect community with God's self. So one way to think about it here at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, the home of, I think, one of the greatest human beings to ever use the medium of television, Fred Rogers, to think of God existing in neighborhood or as neighborhood. Father, Son, Spirit, Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer. Our early ideas around God don't emerge from isolation or individualism, but the divine lives in community. And I believe that Trinitarian theological pattern is indeed for us an ethical and anthropological pattern. The human beings must live in community. Now, community is complex.
Yes.
It is not always easy. If you follow kind of the rhythm or the trajectory of the biblical text, creation begins in a garden and culminates in a city. That this city that we see in Revelation is a place where persons of every language, every background, every ethnicity gather together. And that always brings a richness, a complexity, but it also brings tension. And what neighborhood looks like is very much like a space that I think that Fred Rogers tried to teach children like me who watch PBS, who got it from parents, grandparents, church, and Fred Rogers, that you look for the helpers, you look for the hopers, you acknowledge those who make community possible. And community, I think, requires imagination.
Yes.
So I think about Mr. Rogers in the land of make-believe.
Yes, absolutely.
Like without imagination, community, neighborhood, or even who is to be considered our neighbor, without imagination, those things can become calcified, hardened, rigid. And I do not think that that's what this is an expanding definition always including and never excluding.
I absolutely love that. And you know, I write about moral imagination in my work and see imagination as a powerful tool, but imagination is also not neutral, right? So imagination has these positive attributes to it, but we also have people who have imagined worlds and systems and structures and cities and communities and neighborhoods that are not as inclusive, but they actually imagine things that would be exclusive. That's a different understanding of God that would lead to that type of imagination. I think of it more as moral depravity and not the positives of what I think through as moral imagination. But I also loved your framing as you were working through the Trinity. And I began to also think through, how do we see the neighbor connected to the neighborhood? How are we making that, and how does our theology help us to understand both? Because there are times when you can have the story of, well, who is my neighbor, right? And we can figure, oh yeah, it's the person who, but who do we let within our neighborhood, considering the neighbor? And so as we think through these types of,
See, you, again, Willie Jennings, I owe him, because I know this comes from a Willie Jennings lecture. He talked about people running from the Incarnation. To separate neighbor from neighborhood is to run from the Incarnation, to run from the challenges of corporeal existence, bodily existence, challenges, systems. To the neighborhood is the spatial extension of neighbor. It is dangerous to separate the neighbor from the neighborhood. I think it's a bad thing. That's a great question.
yeah, it is a bad thing, and yet we see it.
Yes, I think all of us need to take inventory of the persons with whom we share discourse and space, and to know that our world will be no better than those interactions. Now, I'm not arguing for the Pollyannish, if you live in a neighborhood with all kinds of people, you will necessarily be just or solve the problems of the world. I mean, not just the optics. I mean, I work in Washington, D.C., where optics, everybody's taking pictures, everybody's projecting images, but really getting to know. So it looks like the conversation I was having with Jimmy today around his mother being Korean,
Yes.
the food ways,
Yes.
the cultural ways. I need to learn that, to know that. I don't want to live in isolation. And what's fascinating to me is a text like Revelation and other things that you and I have shared in education. Let's even talk about our own denomination, which is problematic in many ways, but its own conception of what it means to be global. Mm-hmm. That we must be in community and conversation, and we must allow those interactions to change us, to expand our humanity, expand our thinking, expand our imagination.
Yeah. So as the pastor of Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church, speaking of our denomination, and speaking of the way that optics begin to shape systems and structures and realities, you, a few years ago, had a challenge happen that became pretty public at your church. It also reinforced, though, for me, some of the challenges of our churches that sit in city spaces where we may or may not have the same people around us now that were once there when the church itself was rising up within that city space. And so then the systems, the structures, the support, what people think can be possible begins to shift and change. What has it been like pastoring Metropolitan? And how does that factor into this understanding of a theology of neighbor?
So I was appointed in 2014 by William DeVoe. And I remember when he appointed me, I tried to artfully dodge the appointment, to tell him that he would be better served doing something else. But he said to me, I'm not asking you if you want to go, I am sending you. And I will never forget that. And I was like, well, what are you thinking? And he said, I said, I feel like you're strapping 200 years of history on my back. And he said, I am. Now do something with it. And I remember him now as ancestor sharing those things, and I reflect upon them. It is fascinating because you're right. Metropolitan, like all churches that were built in that time period in the late 1800s, people did not build churches where they did not live, right? Because they were walking. So if you come to the area now, you could not believe that at one time, Black people were proximate to that space, because it is very difficult to see many Black people there today. There's a little residential, but we are about 4 or 5 blocks from the White House. The property is extraordinarily valuable. And what we have to do, actually, AnneMarie, is to be creative with what it means to be stewards of neighbor. Because the neighborhoods that struggle most in the district are not within our line of sight. So we have committed to building relationships there so that we can organically learn with and grow alongside those in the district who have great promise, but who have also suffered the pain of the city in its shifting. So for me, let me get at it this way. When you are like us, motivated by the intellectual, you got a vision of what the world ought to be, going to DC as a pastor was very exciting, because you're in the nation's capital, all that good stuff. But DC can be seductive and deceptive. The way I think of it, there is Washington, which is where tourists come, and there is DC, 8 wards of real people. You can be seduced into being a pastor in that city, a pastor within Washington, which keeps you in a sanitized, antiseptic reality. Or you can dive into the 8 wards, learning the city and the people. And what I think is, if there is strength and growth in Metropolitan, which I think there has been, it is because we are seeking to connect ourselves with the people. And I firmly believe that I don't believe that God nor people should care about a church that doesn't care about the neighborhood. Why should spirit be invested or other people be invested in a place that is not invested in the people around the space? And what I also firmly believe is neighbors who come in must not fit our mold, need not relinquish the truth of who they are, but they come in and we become a body together. A new person coming in may add more complexity, may add more color, may add more humor, may add whatever, but that is what makes it beautiful. But again, that's also what makes it a challenge.
It makes it challenging, definitely.
It's both, it's both.
Definitely. You described the way that area has changed. I've been in DC a couple of times just this year, in January and earlier this month in March. And so I was in the area of Metropolitan. I actually visited in January, and I walked from my hotel to the church. I passed very few places that felt residential. There were some,
yes,
but a lot of it feels not.
No, you're right.
Do they see themselves as a part of your neighborhood?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I like sociological, I guess anthropological bootleg studies. And what that means is I situate myself near the front of Metropolitan and just watch people walk by. The majority of people don't even see it.
Yeah,
Wow. And you think about it, because it's a
huge church.
Huge and gorgeous space.
And it is distinct.
It is distinct. It is, to use Paul's language, it seems untimely born, the King James, because it doesn't seem like it fits. And it doesn't fit architecturally, because there is a huge modern parking garage on the left and the American Chemical Society on the right. I can show you pictures where Metropolitan was the towering architectural gem in the neighborhood. No longer.
No longer.
People are so busy getting where they're going, but for those who slow down, they just are like, what is this? Like I write about this in the book. I marvel at people who are moving down M Street, headed to 16th, headed to Georgetown in that direction, and they stop. So I think like so much of the life of church in this first third of the 21st century, people either don't pay attention or they become wrapped by and to me that, to live in that. And Metropolitan has made a lot of noise. You mentioned some of it on a number of fronts. And what I think will make us have a ministry of impact is that people see us, that we are not rendered invisible by the busyness of the District of Columbia. Because the District of Columbia is the kind of place where people are literally going underground, coming above ground, going back underground. And I think about how that can be dehumanizing, unstabilizing, and what's your neighborhood? What is? I have to admit, I talk a lot about neighborliness, but when I lived in an apartment complex in DC, I did not know the names of my neighbors, and I passed by them every day. There is a reality in that city that is disconnection, because many people who come to DC, they don't stay long.
They don't stay long, yeah.
3 years, 4 years, 10 years, but they're in and out. And there is that reality, but when you get to know the city, they're also rich. I think you said Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods?
90 neighborhoods, yes.
Yeah, DC is rich in neighborhoods, rich in culture, and I am seeking to immerse myself so that those people would be willing to immerse themselves in our community. And some of that happens, but to do the work of neighboring is a different and more difficult kind of work, I would argue, in a place like Washington.
So one of the things, as you were describing the observations that you make as people are walking by, it reminded me of a part of your lecture last night, because you were our Kelso lecturer last night, and so thank you for being the 2026 Kelso lecturer. But you talked about beauty and art as a drawing force. And as I think about the edifice of Metropolitan, it is beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
It is beautiful.
But you've also placed a form of performance art, not really performance art, but a form of art that still remains outside. It was at least there when I walked by in January.
Oh, yes.
Large Black Lives Matter sign.
Yes.
As another way of doing what? What was your intention behind that? Theologically or etymologically or all of the other things?
So we'll get to the humor first. When the Proud Boys defaced our property and took the sign down, I was being interviewed. Everybody, AnneMarie, from Russian stuff to German, everybody wanted to talk about it. So I told somebody, we are going to replace the sign that they tore down and make it bigger and blacker. So it's like a big, huge sign. It's a huge sign. It is huge, and that was my intention. Was theologically, we are made in the image and likeness of God. God delights in our being in this space as much as God delights in any human that God created being in the space. And you cannot intimidate us. Not only politically can you not intimidate us, but you cannot intimidate us theologically. You cannot intimidate us economically. You cannot intimidate us ancestrally. The connection I make is this. So the people that tore the sign down, they literally recorded themselves doing nasty things and saying and singing racial epithets. Their doing what they did is an extension of their ancestral politics of violence.
Yep. And their theological understanding.
Oh yes, that theirs is a God who privileges them.
He privileges them.
Yes. And no doubt about it. And so I remind myself and others that Frederick Douglass himself, who was a member of the AME Zion Church, not a member of Metropolitan, but loved it and worshiped there frequently, he spoke from there. And here is a man who was born in bondage. He spoke against the Chinese Exclusion Act. And I'm like, wow. Here is a man who could have been morally small and said, this country is for us. But he said the Chinese who are here, who are good enough to build economies and railroads and to help make this, and they help to make this nation what it is, they should be afforded full rights of citizenship. And this is an interesting thing about the American Project, that in the lecture, I was off paper, but I was moved to talk about the diseased reality of American democracy. which is it always seeks to exclude.
Yeah.
It keeps finding new people to exclude. It will not extend its liberties. It is today, it is transgender communities, immigrants coming from
particular places.
Well, you're right. Not all. Now, if you're a persecuted Afrikaner or you're welcome here. So I was drawn into the beauty of those who, even though they were excluded, refused to exclude others, saw themselves as a part of this complex yet beautiful tapestry we call humanity. And that's what we were taught.
Yeah,
that's what my book is about. That is what we were taught. If you lived and grew up in the houses that we grew up in Florida and in Georgia, not only were we taught, they demanded that we be that kind of human being. And that, if there is, Du Bois wrote about the gift of black folk. If there is a gift of black folk, it is that gift. It is this dogged pursuit of what it means to have a welcome table where all humans are able to choose a seat and sit down.
Well, as we begin to close this out, if you, because this has been wonderful, and I am hopeful that people are going to take something amazing from this conversation. If you were to give advice to someone starting out, you are a pastor, you are an author, you are a scholar and strategist and organizer, what would be a piece of advice in any of those categories or all, or simply as a human, that you might give and offer for them to take with them?
So I've been a pastor since the 1900s.
That's what the young people say.
Like
you were born in the 1900s.
Like literally, I started pastoring and it's my one joke that never fails. From the pastoral perspective, but I think this extends to any complex human community. When entering a space, learn the story of the space, the place, and the people. I think also this is what makes one a neighbor. You enter a space listening and learning. When I have gone into churches, because many times people are looking for someone to fix them or solve their problems, they'll say to me, "What is your vision for this place?" And I'll say to them, I have no vision for this place because I don't yet know the place, nor do I know you. When I get to know the place and the people, then together we can imagine what is possible. There can be no neighborhood from the nation-state perspective or the 3-block perspective if those who come in tell you who you are, tell you what you are supposed to do, limit the space of your imagination or your movement. That's not a neighbor, that is a conquistador. That is someone who wants to extract. I don't want to extract in community. I want to listen, I want to learn, and I want us to inhabit what emerges together as we learn, grow, have conflict, have challenges, but keep striving together to be beautifully human and richly connected to what the divine is calling us to be and to do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Since 1991, the Metro Urban Institute has been bridging faith and justice in the community, and we are seeking to do this work within neighborhoods. We are a part of the PTS Neighborhood Collaborative, and we hope that you have enjoyed this episode of the series.